Defenses and fears, welcome here. Yes, you're welcome here. Yes, you're welcome here. Good afternoon. I'm Rev Dave Thompson, and I'm really happy to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study today. So I'm a civil human minister, and what that means is that I focus my ministry on building human peace and common ground. So in that effort, I'm looking at my own spiritual heritage and trying to find those things that I believe can be applied across the board to all humans, regardless of our faith, regardless of our different politics, regardless of our different lifestyles. I truly do feel that 2,000 years ago, even the words of Jesus had some universal teachings that when we apply them today actually are important and can help us go a direction that's going to create a peaceful and happy society for us here and now. Let's go ahead and jump into the passage today. It's Matthew chapter 21, verses 33 through 46. Starting in verse 33. Hear another parable. There was a certain landowner who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it, dug a winepress in it, and built a tower. And he leased it to vine dressers and went into a far country. Now when the vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the vine dressers that they might receive its fruits. And the wine dressers took his servants, beat one, and killed and stoned another. And he sent other servants, more than the first, and they likewise to them. Then, last of all, he sent his son to them, saying, They will respect my son. But when the wine dressers saw the son, they said among themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. And they caught him and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those wine dressers? They, meaning the Pharisees, they said to him, He will destroy those wicked men miserably, and lease his vineyard to another wine dresser, who will render to him the fruits in their season. And Jesus said to them, Did you not ever read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruits of it. And whoever falls on this stone will be broken, but on whomever it falls it will grind him to powder. Now when the chief priests and Pharisees heard his parable, they perceived that he was speaking of them. But when they sought to lay hands on them, they feared the multitudes, because they looked to Jesus as a prophet. Wow, sometimes this particular version of the scriptures, this translation, it's the New King James Version. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to read because it has much more high church kind of language and old Elizabethan English in it. So forgive me for my ramblings. But this is a really interesting story to me. And it has a lot to unpack because there's a lot that's involved in what's being said here that was really culturally driven, especially within their own religious climate. And I really strongly believe that these things that Jesus is actually addressing 2,000 years ago are really relevant right here and right now in our own modern society. So let's walk through the passage a little bit and just make sure that we know what's going on and what's being said. So first, let me set this up. Jesus is in the temple, right? So this is the capital city of Jerusalem. This is the Passover holiday, which is when hundreds of thousands of pilgrims from around the country come to Jerusalem to do all of these rituals and religious things. This area, this temple, is sort of like their Supreme Court of the day. They are a religious oligarchy, or excuse me, a religious theocracy. So in other words, that means that they are run by their religious rules. In the US, for instance, where I'm right now, we at least are supposed to have our laws that are separate from the different religions that we all have, so that we can all worship the God and interpret the scriptures the way that we feel it should be interpreted, while still working within laws that we all agree to. So in this time, all of these people are coming to take care of the things that they need to pay for, fines, things that they need to rectify where the court is concerned, and to come to do some worship stuff. So this is a really big event. And you may remember that this is right now when Jesus has the day before cleaned out all of the people who were setting up shops and money exchangers because they had to use temple money and they couldn't use their Roman money, and all of these different money-making schemes that they had developed and were in the temple of God. Jesus clears them all out and says, look, this is supposed to be a place of prayer. It's supposed to be a place of helping people. This is where we come to help each other, not to steal money from the poor and not to lord it over them, the power that some of us have. So in fact, he's now in the temple teaching. And you may recall the chief priests in our last study, the chief priests who are like the best of the best of the best in their religious organization, and the Pharisees, these people that Jesus, that are kind of coming at Jesus right now, they are the leaders of the day, the religious leaders of the day. So when Jesus shares this particular story, it really means a lot to them. And quite frankly, it's going to upset them, because what he is saying is highly offensive, which I love. I love the fact that Jesus is calling them out because nobody else is. He's one of the people that the poor and the untouchables, as they're called in their society, that those people look to, because he's willing to step up and willing to talk about the things that people are not willing to talk about. And that's really important, especially in this time right now. So what's this story? We have this owner, and this owner creates a vineyard. He puts in a well, he puts in a wine press, basically builds a turnkey solution for somebody who's wanting to lease it out and become a winemaker. I know we have this back in Lake County, where I spent about my spouse and I spent 5-6 years, and there were just a ton of different vineyards around, and a lot of different people who had labels and their own wine, and so it was really interesting to be in that culture and to see what is involved in that process. And nonetheless, this process is still the same for the most part as it was 2,000 years ago. So we have this owner who has this land, built out this great vineyard, and he gives it to a couple of tenants who want to lease it, who are going to use the space and the fields to grow the crop and make the wine. And as a result of this, you might call it sharecropping, something that they did in later in English land, in England, they would do sharecropping, which essentially was, you come in and you lease out a piece of land, you grow your produce, and then you give a portion of either the profits or the produce to the person who you rented the land from. So this owner is trying to get what he's owed, which is essentially, it looks like produce, which means grapes. And so he sends out his servants to go to this vineyard and collect what he's owed. And when the servants get to the vineyard people are not the kind of people that you really want as tenants, because they are the ones who are selfish and greedy, and they are only interested in what they can get out of it. And so they're not interested in paying or participating in what the owner has given them. So they kill and stone and beat one of the servants. I would imagine they beat one servant so they could let him run back to the owner to let the owner know what happened. And so he sends more servants the second time. And they do exactly the same thing. And then the owner is probably fed up by now. He says, okay, you know what? I'm going to send my son, I guess, because, hey, why don't you go ahead and check out the vineyard, see what's going on. And they're like, sure, they won't do anything to the son, because clearly if they do that, it would really upset the owner. And he could come out in full force against them. But they don't care. They're so comfortable, these tenants, in who they are and in the power that they hold, that they end up killing the Son as well. So why is Jesus talking about this? What in the world does this 2,000-year-old parable have to do with us as human beings today? It's exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. You see, when Jesus was saying this at the religious leaders of his day, they were living in comfort. They were living in luxury. That they had created a society that allowed them to live very luxurious lives, while many, many, many people were suffering. Many poor people could barely find food to eat, and they would not even provide any health care to their own people. Jesus spent his time healing people, going around and healing the sick and feeding them. It's clear to the religious leaders what Jesus is doing. They know that he is talking about them, and they know what they should be held accountable to. What does this have to do, this story? Why is it these three groups of group of servants, another group of servants, and then the Son? Jesus is pointing out that in the history of Israel, with the current religious organization, the current religious sort of structure is fairly new for the Israelites, about 500 years or so. And I mean, that doesn't sound new, but it is in the grand scheme of an ancient society. And Jesus is saying, look, you have had people come to you and tell you you need to change. Give the money that you have in excess to the poor and the suffering. They are just as important as you are. And they didn't care. They ended up killing a lot of their prophets. And the Pharisees know this. And they know that Jesus is aware that they're probably going to kill him because they don't like him. They do not like Jesus because he's upsetting the system, right? So he's taking away their money-making power. They've become quite comfortable. And Jesus is rocking that boat. And when people have money taken away from them, money that they have knowingly stolen and taken from those who are suffering, they are not afraid of doing anything it takes to keep that comfort. So 2,000 years later, we still have religious leaders who live in exorbitant luxury, who live in insane amounts of comfort. Meanwhile, we have homeless population growing faster than we really ever have since the Great Depression, at least in the US. We have healthcare being depleted and becoming so expensive that most people can't get it. And so they're living basically hoping that they won't have some catastrophe in healthcare. And if they do, they're going to be in debt for the rest of their lives. We still have those religious leaders who are perfectly happy the way things are right now because they live in comfort. That goes for our social and our political leaders as well. Back in this day, when this whole thing is happening right here, the political, social, and religious people were the same thing. We've separated that out a lot in some of our modern civilizations and the way that we structure our politics. Today, we've separated them out into church, into politics, and then society movers and influencers. Celebrities, people who, when they say something, it influences them, or it influences the masses. We still have such significant wealth in our leadership, and yet such significant suffering of the poor and of those who are not able to help themselves. Meanwhile, we create more laborious requirements. We create more difficult steps to even pick oneself up by one's boots. We have credits systems that follow people their whole life, making it impossible for them not only to get a good job, but also to even get a good place to live. I do hope, even after reading this, this particular passage, to note that there's one huge positive in this. I mean, it sounds pretty depressing, talking about it, just what we've talked about so far today. But I want to point out the end. The end of this story that Jesus actually tells to the Pharisees and the people who were in the temple that day. He says, the owner of the vineyard evicts the leadership and gives his benefit to new tenants, to people who will provide the fruit and to do what is good. The word fruit here, we've heard it before, right? It's one of Jesus's favorite words to talk about the good benefits of being a good person. And those fruits are compassion. They're long-suffering, their forgiveness, their humility, their peacemaking. These are the virtues and the fruits of what a good society looks like, even for just human beings, regardless of our faith. It doesn't take faith to tell us that compassion is a good thing. It doesn't take our pastor or our church or our minister or our rabbi to tell us that humility is beneficial. These are universal teachings, and I ask that you would spend maybe some time today thinking about the ways in which you can maybe help others realize that it's not right for leaders to live in luxury, especially luxury based upon the money and the taxation of the poor and those who go without. It's not right, and it isn't just. And eventually, that will have a reckoning. I pray that it is peaceful and not violent. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your reflections. I really would appreciate it if you put those underneath the video in the comments. I'd love it if you would subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a little button down here that you can click on. And for those of you on Facebook, to like my page so that we can stay in contact with one another, so I can keep you up to date on some of the really interesting things that are going to be coming on down the road. Again, thank you for joining me this morning. I do hope that you have a really good day. And until tomorrow, live at noon, I want you to know that I do love you. And I hope you choose to love yourself. It's the only love in this world that we have any control over. And now I ask that you join me so that as we go about the rest of our day, we'll love our neighbors the same way. Thank you.